Hello and welcome once again to episode 103 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist Spencer.
Hey there.
So it's been a busy week in several technological circles, so we figured we would touch on some of those just to see what we think about them and how they affect us as developers. The first of which is Google shutting down yet another thing. This is what Google does. They make things get people excited and then shut it down on them. I think that's how they collect bad energy, and they're going to do something with this bad energy one day. I mean, they said don't be evil, but that is clearly playing a game of letting people overthink stuff so that way they can collect all this bad energy and do something with it, because they are clearly wanting people to get frustrated and mad at them, because they never really continue with anything other than Gmail. I think Gmail is one of the only things that they've launched since search and kept around, and YouTube doesn't count because they bought that. So yeah, what do you think about this?
Yeah,
we didn't even say what was shutting down. It could be anything. This could be a timely announcement at any point in the year.
Yeah, literally could be anything. There's a website called Killed by Google that lists out everything that Google has killed. And at the top, there's a filter menu. 274 things, okay? From apps, 54 apps, 199 services, and 21 hardware items. So yeah, it could be anything, but this time it's Stadia, which I guess is both hardware and software because they had those little controllers. Pretty.
I guess there's other things being killed off too. I didn't even notice.
Google Cloud, man. I mean, all the time.
YouTube Originals. Oh, I guess that's no longer a thing. I never heard of
Google
OnHub.
Hangouts.
I knew Hangouts was going away and getting renamed or whatever.
Yeah, they renamed it to Meet, which is already a thing. So I don't know. I mean, Google's thing of don't be evil, they removed that long ago, and I don't know. They must have some pretty killer hardware engineers to be able to harness this this negative energy and store it somehow in a battery. That's kind of cool.
I'm just realizing what the icon for these are. It's a freaking guillotine.
So good.
And then it's a tombstone when it's been killed off. Are there any other good bits on this thing? No. This is just a purely wonderful site, hosted and brought to you by MailChimp, not our sponsor. But yeah, this is hilarious. Thank you for sharing this.
AngularJS, that lived for 11 years. That's somewhat related to what we do.
Oh, Angular is no longer a thing?
Killed off in 2021.
Oh, I should tell some of my teammates that it's no longer a thing because I think they're still developing with it.
What I found interesting about the Stadia thing, especially though, was the first thing I really heard. Dimitri posted about it in our Slack channel, and then I went on Twitter, and the first thing that I saw was a developer that was actively working on a game for Stadia, finding out through this whole thing. Google didn't let them know. It was through Twitter, basically, that they found out that they didn't have a platform to develop on. So that was very poorly communicated. I guess there was an internal.
At least they're going to get a refund, right? I mean, people who bought stuff for Stadia, they get refunds, but is the developer going to get a refund, or is that going to be a costly, court case to deal with?
I guess one thing is if it was a Stadia exclusive, hopefully that they can find. I guess it would just be another publisher to pick up the game and publish it through them. Everything that they're doing is just basically it's probably just a PC game. So in theory, it's not like their development efforts are completely wasted. They just need to find a platform to release it on, which is that sucks. So
yeah, well, it might have also been
bummer.
a game that has fairly high requirements that were met by the Google Stadia infrastructure that normal people might not have. They were just relying on that and skipping out on the timely and expensive optimization steps to get it really running everywhere. So Yeah, I learned about this through a coworker who was like actually invested in playing Google Stadia. And they're like,
Oh,
what am I supposed to do now? And I'm like, you should just buy a Switch, because chances are Nintendo won't come out with a new Switch. They're like 5 years and going. It's like this thing is still selling like
yeah.
hotcakes. They're going to continue selling it like hotcakes for another 5 years. So your investment is sound there, even though it's like ancient technology by like today's standards. But it's
Yeah.
fun, right? That's at the end of the day, like that's what these things are made for, is to be fun. And if an ancient console satisfies that, then
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, I mean, I there was another story of this guy that had spent 6,000 hours in Red Dead Redemption 2 through Stadia, and I don't think he can like get his save data out or anything. So, like, that kind of stuff that hits me hard because I had that whole thing with my Switch and like getting
It's
banned
a
by
time
Nintendo for
investment.
trying to back up my Switch. I don't know. It's a huge bummer, and I guess no one. I mean, Dimitri mentioned this before we started. Like, what was it, 3 months ago that they were like, "Yeah, we're not killing off Stadia. It's still going strong." And then 3 months ago, dude, that sucks. That's not even like a year. That's
It's
like
nothing in tech time.
that's nothing. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I guess
big old.
this is a good lesson for anyone making a product. Is if you make a lot of products and you constantly kill them off, and people notice that, that's not good, right? You're gonna
No.
build up so much bad mojo. Like, I personally will never trust a Google product because they have killed off so many products in the past, some that I've used and many that I have never used. But the fact that I hear that like they've upset yet another group that has learned to rely on them, like, I'm never gonna trust anything that Google makes, like,
Yeah.
ever. It's just not worth it to me, to put my eggs in that basket, because chances are it's never gonna stick around. On like, I'm not gonna say this as like an Apple fanboy or anything, but like, even the frameworks that Apple comes out with, like, at the very least, those stick around and stay poorly maintained, but they don't go anywhere, and you can be reasonably
You can
sure
use
that if you
them.
build something, like, you have 10 years of roadmap ahead of you. And you might get unlucky, and it might get like cans, like Carbon was, but Carbon had like a 15-year run at least. So it's
Yeah.
not like you were short on time. So like, if you're building anything and your customers see that you are like losing their trust in this way, that's like a big no-no, I think, especially from a business point of view.
Yeah. I think the only thing I don't know. Maybe it's too early to call, but I think the only thing in recent memory for Apple is like the original HomePod. Now there's only HomePod Mini.
Yeah,
I just want to refresh, but they killed it off, and so it's like there's this weird gap. So,
but they continue to support
but in
HomePods.
general,
They still get updates.
yes,
Mine
I did
still
just get an
work.
update.
I've
Yep,
heard that many
that's
people's
true.
like they are starting to die, and there's not
Oh
much like
no,
options for you. But like, still works.
yeah, I use my original HomePod very little. It's in one room, and I'm not there very often, but still works, and it's loud, so that's great.
Yeah.
So
Here was
the
another
support is there.
excellent
That's true.
comic of like, it was an older comic when they killed off Reader, but there's a cumulative cost of maintaining Reader, which is just like a steadily increasing linear line.
Yeah,
And then there's the cumulative cost of lack of trust in Google's long-term commitment to its products, and that just steeply like overshoots at one point. And there's a
the
little
intersection. Oops.
there's a little bubble at that intersection that just says "oops," because once you pass the threshold, you're never gaining that trust back. It's like,
Nope.
for a ever-growing population that just gets constantly like punched in the gut every time they give you that trust.
Yeah.
It's not great. So if you're listening, we'll put a link in our show notes for this. But yeah, it doesn't look good. Talking about things that do look good, Apple has decided to change their mind, which is exceedingly rare, but it seems like more and more common in past beta cycles, of how they're going to treat a new feature.
Yeah, so Stage Manager is getting a little bit more support than it originally was, which I think was M1 iPads only, right? It was
Yep.
like just locked down to M1. Now, let's see, I just had it up. Ah, crap.
The A12X and the
Um,
A12Z, I think. So the two prior generations of iPad Pros.
really?
Yep.
That seems the A12Z is a couple years old by now, right? Oh yeah, okay. So
It's the two prior generations, I think. So however years work for that. And I'm just gonna buy whatever iPad comes out later this year because my battery is
yeah,
not doing so great.
yeah.
But yeah,
So this says, I'm just going off of imore.com. It says, uh, and this could be old. Oh, this is from August 2022. So maybe this is not right. But it says the iPad Air, 5th generation, 11-inch iPad Pro, and 12.9-inch iPad Pro 2021. So there's probably more than that. Oh,
yeah, I think those were the originals.
yeah. Oh, yeah. 2018 and 2020 models that used the A12X and A12Z. Dang, that's sweet, dude. I'm kind of sad that I sold my iPad Pro now. But have
Happens.
you used it?
I have not. So I've heard a mixed bag of hot garbage and like watch out. This is danger territory of very very beta, and supposedly shipping soon. And that does not give me encouragement that this is going to like work out okay for Apple. There have been a lot of people wondering like why at this stage. So there's a few things that happened. There was a lot of trouble with Stage Manager up until like this point, basically. And this was only on the M1s, and it worked with its external display. Apple kept saying in new versions of Xcode, "Hey, Stage Manager is updated for the simulator so that we can test this out." Was not updated for the simulator. The simulators, like you had to go through hoops of a .apple internal, which if you fun fact, if you go to your hard drive, this root folder, and you add a .apple internal folder there, that will enable all sorts of debug features onto your computer, which you probably shouldn't ever touch. One of those was Stage Manager being allowed. So was like still gated behind that. And it was also like both a hot mess in terms of bugs, but also a hot mess in terms of user expectations. Like, hey, if I'm going to do this, what's going to happen? And like things did not seem like they were super well thought out, or that they were going to satisfy what actual users' needs were going to be. And this is with the Giant Asterisk. I've never tried this. This is just what other people have been saying on Twitter and on podcasts. Now comes the point where Apple's like, okay, we said initially that it would be really hard for older iPads to support these features, aka running like 4 apps at once.
Right.
And they kind of stepped back from that. But they also disabled the external monitor support. And this seems to have made Stage Manager less stable, at least in terms of like people's usage of it. So it remains to be seen if that is because they did a big rewrite to allow the system to better support older devices, because a bunch of people like bought iPad Pros, including the A12, X and Z models, assuming that the software was just coming. It was just like delayed, but the power of the processor was there, right? It's like so underutilized for the apps that were running on them that it was just like the software will catch up, and then I can finally start using this device that I bought 2 years ago to actually do some real work. And then Apple basically said at this year's Dub that like, hey, we have this brand new Stage Manager thing. It's only in the M1s. Now they're backpedaling and saying, hey, we did the hard work to get it running on the older devices, and we're going to ship external display support later this year, whenever that is. But that's going to be a separate update. So first it's going to launch on the iPad itself, which to be fair, like absolutely no one is using this with their external monitor anyways. So they're not like really holding anyone back. They're just going to be helping more people, which seems to be the goal here. However, people are confused as to why like things got worse in the process. It's probably because they rewrote a whole bunch of system components to like work on more like CPU styles, especially ones that were not necessarily made for like running with virtual memory and all that. So maybe it's related to that, and all that like performance tuning included a whole bunch of regressions, or maybe we're getting an ancient build. As far as like, why would we be getting an ancient build to test with? Because that makes like no sense in my mind. I would think you would want the latest builds for people to test with, because this is a beta. Like having them test something that you as a developer are like removed from, like, doesn't seem to help anyone. So I don't know like what's going on at Apple to have like landed themselves in this situation. I am of the opinion that if you're making something, finish it, then announce it. Don't just like announce it and then have your team like now start working on it, because this is the situation you get in. So yeah, in terms of lesson number 2, as brought to us by giant corporations, if you're gonna be working on something, sure, you can announce that you're planning on something. Don't give a date. Just like it's either pie in the sky, present it as pie in the sky, not as you finished it, because then if you can't finish it, you're royally in a position where like people will lose trust in you, and that's just how it works. So yeah, I don't know what else to say there.
Yeah, as I remember, iPadOS was originally supposed to come out. iPadOS 16 was supposed to come out at the same time as iOS 16, but I think it's really because of Stage Manager that it was delayed, and I don't think we have even 16.1 yet. I don't know.
No, it's going to come in 16.1.
Yeah, okay. I'm on a beta on one iPad for work and not on the other. I can't remember when the release is, but yeah, I mean, seems odd. And you know, I get that we have the expectation of yearly iOS releases, but if they wouldn't have announced, like you said, just that expectation of, hey, we've got this thing, it's coming out, and then everyone's like, oh, this beta sucks, then you know, there probably wouldn't be as much discourse on Twitter and everywhere that it's pretty negative. It's been like the first like real, I think, negative thing that I've seen with like an Apple OS for a while. I think there was some stuff with like Big Sur, if I remember right, but yeah. Just, you know, it's done when it's done, and I get that Apple needs to announce this for shareholders or whatever to make them happy, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know like why they feel the need to make shareholders happy. They never felt that need, really, up until they actually started making shareholders tons and tons of money. So I guess now it's a more prescient thing, but like I don't know who's gonna complain about like how Apple, like, they are doing horribly from like a management point of view at this particular point in time, and like people are still happy with Apple. So like
no, I know
that trust can erode, and that's like the very fine line that Apple needs to be careful. Like, this is still beta. Like, no one should judge them based on anything yet, because they didn't ship anything. But they did delay certain things, and delaying like the iPad means that you can't ship iCloud photo library, or what was it called, shared photo library. You can't ship that because if people have more than one device, it's not like you can just upgrade the iPhones and then the Macs are just sitting there like, oh, I don't know what a photo library is anymore, because all the photos went poof. Or the iPad might do a similar thing. Like, I almost wish Apple would release like the apps and the system separately. And I know the apps are like well integrated and deeply dependent on the system, so it's like unfortunate that they can't. But like stuff like photo library, like that should have been something that they can release on every device at one point in time. Same with like the new notes. Like, they've done this in the past where they like rewrote notes, but then you can't access notes on your Mac because like they rewrote it until the Mac version ships. So they
Yep,
might as
I
well not
remember
have
the-
rewrote Notes or released it early, and they should have just waited for Notes to come out with the app. And sure, there are some users that could have used it and so on forth. And it's like a big mess. All of their making. So, like,
Yep.
yeah, it may have been better for Apple to like be able to ship things a little bit more piecemeal, and a little bit less dependent on like the system itself if they needed to. And they did a great job with Swift here, right? You were able to ship with Swift before the system even supported Swift. And like that was working well. Like, yes, the binaries are bigger, but yes, we live with gigabit internet connections. Like, it's not, that part is not the end of everything anymore. And I think so many people would benefit from that. Like, if Swift UI were its own like separate thing that can be bundled into the app, sure, it's closed source. Like, we're never going to solve that. But if Apple can improve it within like beta stages of later versions of Xcode, and you can ship that to all your users, then like people are going to benefit from that, because no one's going to hold back using SwiftUI, and everyone's going to go all in and start using it because it's available for any version of the OS that they want to ship to, right? And like that's a yet another in a seemingly larger list of lessons from giant corporations that like we as smaller developers can learn from, right? And to complete the trifecta, from OpenAI we have yet another big giant corporation owned by like super rich people. I'm assuming, I don't know who owns OpenAI, but it feels very big and corporate-y, and rich. But they came out with a thing called DALL-E, and DALL-E 2 specifically. And it was this amazing technology that basically allowed you to type words and get an image out of nothing. And this has like been a Google image searcher's dream up until now, of just being able to just search the internet for that perfect image. Well, here we have something that can invent a new image just for you. But those researchers realized the dangers of releasing this. And therefore they said like, hey, we're going to make this really limited because people can just fake whatever on earth that they want. And immediately that week, I think we got DALL-E Mini or something. And then we got Stable Diffusion. And then we got a whole bunch of other like copycats that essentially did the same thing for free right now for anyone. So there DALL-E was in all its pristine and glory, that supposedly did things properly. And then you have the rest of the world that just moved on because they didn't really care. And as a result, DALL-E Now is publicly available as of this week, I think. And they announced pricing a few weeks ago, but there's no more waitlist. Anyone can just go ahead and sign up for it. But it might be too late, right? Because now you have all these other competing libraries that you can go ahead and use. They're not even, some of them are services, some of them are not. Some of them have like very cheap plans, and DALL-E seems to have a very like watchdoggy type plan where it's like every single time you make a search result, we're going to charge you. It's like, be careful with your creativity. Don't be too creative now. And yeah, so like I guess the lesson here is like, yeah, be careful when you are trying to release something that can potentially like ruin your release schedules because you were trying to do the right thing. And that sounds like wrong. Like you should try to do the right thing, right? But be careful when it's easily copyable and that anyone could go ahead and do it, and maybe like accelerate your schedule or think more about like access and gatekeeping and pricing than you otherwise should, because you may have popularized something, but you may have also given a whole bunch of free publicity to everyone else because you had the scene and they had the quick solution. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what lesson to be learned there, but it's confusing.
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of thoughts in my head about this, and I don't think I can convey it very well. But yeah, I mean, it's like you've got like the whole mentality of like move fast and break things. Like, you know, it's a version 1, don't ship it or just ship it. You know what I mean? But also like keep your cards close to your chest. And so you have this like multi-layered Venn diagram of how
and don't forget, can collapse society. like chances the chances
Well,
are a little
in this
high
case,
on
yes.
stuff like this. So it's
Yes.
like it's
Yeah.
very like hard to judge. I don't even know what the answer is.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just like in general, for any product, like this same thing could happen with less consequences, perhaps, but like in a similar fashion, you could do this for any product you're developing. And it's like, you want to make the product good, but like you want to be either first to market or best to market, I suppose. And like, I think their methodology of making sure it's done well and being kind of careful about something like this that is potentially hazardous was good. But then, like you said, it paved the way for other people to just come in and be like, "Yeah, we don't really care about that, so whatever." And
Here's this fun
they
thing
just,
that you can play with.
yeah. I saw that Facebook kind of came up with a similar thing for like 5-second videos that are
Yeah, and like that is
generated.
like even more like technologically advanced because most of
Yeah.
these like AI things, they aren't stable at all. Like
Sure.
what you do in one thing is not going to give you a very stable result. So you can't do video at all with these things. Like you're going to get wazy, crazy
Yeah.
wackadoodle things, wazy.
Lazy.
And I think Stable Diffusion is special in that regard because you can train it with something else that is new, that is specific to what you're trying to do, and it will incorporate it with everything else. And that allows you to make something that has potentially a narrative. And Corridor Digital did an excellent video where they kind of explored this further. And they basically said for the first time they were able to write a narrative with AI. Like they wrote the narrative, but they used AI to tell the story because the AI was so consistent in the imagery and the characters that you could have the same character pop up in different kind of situations. And if you watch Corridor Digital, it's all their faces that end up popping up in there. It was a great video on this. So like we are definitely getting there, and especially with what Facebook, aka Meta, came out with, is you can do that across multiple frames, which is especially like amazing because you can just make up a video. It's like, hey, I need a 10-second clip of this happening. It's like, okay, here you go. Here's a 10-second clip of that, and that is where the danger that like OpenAI was trying to like step away from. Like Facebook was like, whatever, here you go. And that is like, especially what they didn't want to happen, right? But at this point, the cat is like way out of the bag. So instead of saying, hey, people, you can't use this yet, and like we're going to work with researchers and all that, it might be better to like think of different ways of how to gate people's access or how to educate people so that way they can make better decisions, right? At the end of the day, if we as a society are thinking about this, then we are less likely to be trumped by it. Or if we are trumped by it, more likely to correct for it. And maybe they should have been focusing on that. It's like, hey, if you are going to be doing stuff like this, like don't try to trick people. Like be upfront about what you're doing because we're very rapidly entering a world of fakeness, right? That anything can be made by anyone. And what previously very few subset of people like with excellent skills could like fake something for like a movie, right? And it's like, hey, that's what movies are for. But it's a movie. Nothing about that is being presented as reality. And very soon we are getting the tools to present that as reality. So we need to better be prepared for that eventuality, right?
Yeah. I mean, going back to Corridor Digital, I think of a couple things. They've done deep faking of like Keanu Reeves in a gas station, and then it turns into like this whole fight. And they got like a Keanu Reeves impersonator, but then also fed whatever the deepfake program was a bunch of images of actually Keanu Reeves, and it was pretty dang believable. And then there's all like on kind of a farther end, but perhaps closer to AI generated images and video is like the whole Boss Town dynamics, where it's like the fake robot, like you know, shooting at people and stuff. And it's like that took an entire team of rotoscoping and doing all of this.
It was a ton of work.
a ton of work, and then you just can now tell like an AI generator like, hey, make a robot that's shooting people. Like, it's kind of getting there. Obviously, it's not going to be the same quality, but realistically, I don't think it's that far off that it could get believable. And especially to like, there are gullible people on the internet that did believe that immediately, and they weren't like suspicious of that because perhaps they didn't know at all that something like that was possible, like deep faking. They did like Tom Cruise too, I think.
Yeah. And
super
Luke
good
Skywalker.
videos.
Really? That's not a real person. That's a fictitious one.
Oh yeah.
But they basically showed how you can make a really realistic Luke Skywalker with the right person to be the stand-in, right?
Yeah. So we're on the precipice of something that I think is, like you're saying, society could be society shaking. AI stuff is insane, and it's scary. I think there are a lot of like ethical things that need to be worked out. I don't know. Like you're saying, anyone can just make an image or a video. That's heavy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. And like, not to mention audio. Like, no one realizes this.
Yeah.
But like Adobe a few years ago was just like, hey, check out our tools. It's like you can correct dubs. And this is great for the film production process. It's like, hey, you can take a recording of anyone and just change what they say. And if you just change a few things, you can be very successful at tricking everyone that this is complete tomfoolery and not at all real. And that's especially where this is like terrifying, I think. Because like nothing anyone says as a recording can be taken at face value anymore. And like that including is this. Something, including this might all be not our own thoughts. This might be Spencer putting words into my mouth as he types a script in front of me that I am reading live. And he's not actually doing that, but if I say it, then you might believe it, right? And I think that's the point. Like, we really need to, as a society, get used to the fact that anyone can be the asshole in the room and decide to like trick everyone. Just like computers needed to overhaul their security because it became blatantly obvious that anyone can do bad things on anyone else's computer, like we need to do the same thing for how we like live our life. And sure, there is a certain amount of implicit trust that we should have for like humanity, and it's sad to see that go, but it was never really there. Like,
just going back to like spam emails and being, or like, you're the 1 millionth visitor on this website that you don't get anymore, that kind of thing. It's just an evolution, a great evolution of that on a completely different scale, and but similar thing, I think. I
mean, the ultimate example of this is no one gets hacked anymore. No one gets viruses, but everyone gets phone calls from Microsoft saying, hey, you need to install an update on your computer, and then all of a sudden you're sending gift cards to a person in a different country. And everyone might think, hey, like, that's never going to happen to me. I'm not dumb enough for that. A whole class of people are not dumb, but they are falling for that because like they are pretending to be someone either that they know or pretending to help them, and playing on their emotions to get exactly what they want.
And that would be a perfect example of like deep faking a voice. To like say like, oh, this is your son, whatever, but like have it be in their voice. I don't know.
Yeah, imagine if all it takes is to just do a little search on Facebook to find out like who someone is related to, and then get enough videos of them talking and videos that they've been tagged with or whatnot, and you have all the data's there, right? We are like so close to this eventuality that's really scary.
I feel like it's been a while since I looked into this, but I think I remember looking at or hearing about like an AI voice generator that needs like less, like 60 seconds or less or something to be able to copy your voice. I mean, it's not much at all. So lots of scary stuff.
Yeah, and I can definitely like clarify that I studied linguistics in college, and it is fascinating how few characteristics make up someone's like dialect, their own personal dialect that sounds like them. Like there's a few base frequencies that you need to match. There's a few timings with vowels and where they match and time those vowels. And if you can get enough of those details and you know what to look for, you can really, like, artistically as a single person, you can do it. Now, we're very close to having an automatic button that just does it for anyone. And that's a scary thing, right? We never really had to worry about, like, individual expertise, because yes, individuals will commit crimes and they'll do that, but it's gonna be very few and far between.
The scale,
yeah. And now it's just anyone with a bad idea can be like, wouldn't it be funny if we do this, and potentially cause like mass chaos as a result of that. So I don't want to end this episode on like such negativity, because like the end of the world is upon us, if you were led to believe everything we've been talking about. Yes. But I think that a lot of this is really, really cool, and a lot of this can enable some really, really cool things. And if we put the society needs to evolve as like a separate conversation, because there's no like answer to that. It's just everyone needs like education to be able to navigate this new world we live in. And there's no way around that. I mean, we did it pretty quickly with like how to work from a society with no cell phones to everyone has a cell phone. Like we right. Go through those steps. Everyone gets used to the fact that you don't tap things in emails, and we move forward as a society. So one of the really cool things that Stable Diffusion enables is someone was able to get this running on their iPhone XS, which last I checked is a really old iPhone. And that's cool. It had to be cut up into different models so that way it would not run out of memory. But that enables a lot for potentially like app developers like you and I. Like this is all open source, and being able to like tap into the ability to do this within an app can allow you to make some really creative apps and build tools that can help people do really interesting and creative things. And I think that's where a lot of this is going to do a lot of good for the world, right? Where the more people can gain access to tools like this and gain access on their own devices, meaning they don't have to have a network connection, they don't have to have the ability to pay someone a monthly fee to be able to access stuff like this, the more that they're going to be able to do some really cool and interesting things with it. And I think that's going to enable a whole new like generation of potential storytellers who may not have spent a whole bunch of time like learning how to illustrate or learning how to use Photoshop, but they do have other talents in other spaces that they did focus on, and be able to bring that together in a very different way that no one has seen yet, right? So very much in the bicycle of your mind kind of analogy, I think that this is really going to allow a lot of people to do some really creative things, and that is kind of exciting. Yeah,
it's like there's so much potential on both sides, and like they can do creative things in both a good and a bad way. And I agree. It's exciting, but it's also terrifying.
Yeah.
So, sorry. I turned it negative again. I'm sorry.
Not a problem, because this week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Weekly Swift Exercises. Learning Swift, there's no substitute for practicing. There's literally dozens of people Fernando's mentored through different programs, and he's seen it time and time again. After you learn the basics of programming, you slow down because learning through experience is demanding and painful. Increasing your confidence is key, and there's an easy way to do it: practice. Fernando's weekly exercises help you practice concepts like closures and protocols while implementing actual features like dark mode. It's free to join. Besides the exercises, Fernando sends 1 or 2 articles about learning Swift. Some are technical in nature, but most of them will help you in your career by teaching you things like best practices, working as a team, and getting ready for your first job. Thanks again to Fernando and Weekly Swift Exercises for sponsoring Code Completion. Go to twitter.com/Swift Exercises. That's SwiftExercises today to learn more. So we have a bit of a new thing this week, and that is the Code Completion tip of the week. And this first one I kind of use quite a lot, and it's called reserve capacity. So, Spencer, when you make an array, how big is it? Brand new array, fresh out of the box.
I'd assume the size of the elements that you put into it initially, or
Yep, exactly.
0 if you don't have any elements?
Exactly. So it starts off at like a pretty blank slate, or just big enough for what you put into it because it doesn't need any more. Now, assuming it took a little extra space just in case you wanted to add one or two things, and you add one or two things and you use up all the available space, what happens?
It finds a new chunk of memory to put the rest of the elements? I don't know.
Yep, basically. It goes and looks for a bigger chunk, copies everything over, and then you have some more space to work with.
Okay, I see now. Yes, okay.
Yep, so it will double. I think it doubles, and it probably stops doubling once you get to like gigabyte sizes. It's like, let me add a little bit extra because you probably don't need to double this again. But like if you go to take computer science classes from the 90s, they will convince you that it's doubling because doubling is good. It will essentially, every time you hit a boundary, it will get more space, and it will take time to transfer everything over to that new space, because it's not just going to say like, hey, we need some more, so we're just going to take this extra and tack it on. Sometimes it's able to say like, hey, can we reallocate this existing piece of memory into a little bit larger? And there is space next by, so the system's like, sure, here's some more memory for you for free. And that's excellent when that does happen, but it doesn't always happen. So one way to avoid this happening is if you know the size of the array that you want to have, you can reserve capacity ahead of time. So you make your array that has nothing in it, and you say reserve capacity 10,000, because you know you're about to loop through 10,000 other things and add them after transforming them a bit to your new array. And reserve capacity can help you do that because it will go ahead and tell the array, hey, make sure you have enough room for 10,000. And it may give you 10,000, may only give you 5, or it may like do something appropriate for the system in its current state. But this allows you to skip that step of like doubling until you get to 10,000. And that can save you a lot of memory and a lot of time every single time it needs to double. So anytime you find yourself like looping through an array or a sequence and you need to like move stuff over, or maybe you need to build a dictionary out of an array, anytime you're doing anything like that and you have the for loop manually yourself, you should go ahead and reserve capacity ahead of time based on the number of things you have in the array that you're about to iterate through. And that can save some CPU cycles because you can do the upfront work once instead of several times in your loop.
That's really cool. I did not know how it really worked with sort of the memory reservation. My first assumption was like, okay, it's going to take whatever it has, and then maybe like the last part of the array would be like a reference to the next part of memory that would hold like the rest of the array or whatever. Yeah. That's that. Okay, so like calling reserve capacity makes a lot more sense now, and it's based on the element, like the number of elements, right? It's not based on like X amount of memory. You're not saying like reserve 100 megabytes or whatever of memory.
No, you're reserving enough space for the elements. So if those are structs, it's going to basically multiply 10,000 by the size of your struct. If it's just pointers, it's just going to be the size of a pointer, basically.
Okay, cool.
So if you use map, it does this automatically. So like if you're mapping one array to something else, it's going to make a new array, reserve enough capacity for it, and then basically do this for loop for you, which can or cannot be faster depending on the compiler flags you have on. So there's that. So,
okay, so is there, assuming you always will know the size of the array, is there any point to not reserving capacity?
Laziness is like if you need to do something quick and simple and you don't want to think about it.
Sorry, performance-wise, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, there's never a downside to doing it if you know you need it. If you don't know you're going to need it, like you're going to filter through an array, then reserving capacity might take up way more memory than you need, and it's going to stay used. And it might not be freed until like that array is copied, and it's like, hey, we didn't actually need all this capacity, so we're going to reserve just enough for that copy that we're going to make. So that's the only point in time that you'll be able to reclaim that space. Or as you start deleting things, there's remove keeping capacity. And if you keep the capacity, it will keep it. But if you remove without specifying true to that, it's going to like reallocate a smaller size if you downsize your array. Gotcha. That's where you want to think about it.
Okay. This works on like any collection type, not just arrays. I think you mentioned a dictionary.
Yeah, it works on most collection types. So dictionaries are arrays of key values, like swapping between each other. So that's a fun fact of the implementation detail. Like sets are arrays of hashed, like it's a hash table, but it's still an array of things. So like all of these different sequences are arrays of memory pointers at the end of the day, or like structs, just under the hood. And you have a completely different way of accessing what they vend in terms of like APIs and stuff like that. So any of those types that like offer a way of like accessing a collection probably have reserved capacity. I don't think sequences have reserved capacity because they don't even have a length. They have an underrepresentative count, I think, or I'm sure it's named something slightly different. But it's basically like it can be at least this amount, but it's not making any promises because sometimes you just can't know ahead of time. Like if you're receiving something from the network, because I don't know how many things there are, but there's at least 5 or there's at least 0, and that can give you enough to reserve capacity from. So that's something to watch out for.
Cool. I like it. I'm gonna try to. My goal this week is gonna be to try to find an instance where I can use that at work.
Yeah, anytime you're like iterating through an array and you're like moving it to a different array or like inserting into an array, like reserve capacity. It's a very easy one.
Is there kind of a parallel in Objective-C, or is it just kind of a Swift thing?
Fun fact. So Objective-C has NSArray, right? NSArray is not always an array, and that's something of a surprising fact that many people don't know. It's called a class. Oh, I'm forgetting terms now. A class cluster, and this means that there are a number of subclasses that all have the same API and all behave in a similar way. But there can be many different types of arrays that have the same API as NSArray. So depending how you get your array, it might be something that is very array-like or very non-array-like. Like for instance, you can have cyclic arrays where as you add to the end of them and you reach that capacity and there's some space in the front, it will just like loop over. So you can add and remove from the front and back. It's a double-ended queue in that regard. But Swift does not have that. So Swift has just like a strictly computer science definition of an array, and a double-ended queue or DEC, whatever, I hate that term, has been implemented separately as a part of Swift collections. And everyone learned that term at that point in time. I just called them cyclic arrays up until that point. But reserve capacity or init with capacity in the case of NSArray is classically a no-op. So it does not actually do anything because it might switch implementations depending on how big the array is. So that can save you time or not. Like if you have a ginormous array and you insert or remove from the middle of it, that's going to be a real number in performance. But if array is like no longer an array and is now a partial linked list, and that's why when you said before, like you just assumed an array, like use the capacity and then potentially just linked to another region of memory. NSArray does that. NSArray will absolutely do that if you grow it up to a certain point in time. It'll switch implementations. It'll say, like, hey, new implementation, here's my my pointer to my data store. And that's where the method iterate with continuous buffer or something like that. I don't remember the exact, like, autocomplete. I don't know. Code completion, it's a thing that my brain relies on. So at that point in time, it will actually like give you different buffers and it'll say, hey, here's a continuous buffer that you can loop through. And then once you run out of that, it's going to be like, here's a new continuous buffer that you can loop through. And I think NS data does this, where the data buffers don't have to be contiguous because you might get chunks from like the network and it doesn't have to copy anything. It can take that chunk and then take another chunk and say like, hey, this data is composed of this chunk, this chunk, this chunk, this chunk, and this chunk. And doesn't have to copy anything in that process. It can just keep those pointers alive. So going back to what you're saying previously about like, oh, I thought it was this way. That's a very reasonable way of doing it. And that's something that I think NSData and NSArray actually do under the hood in some circumstances on some versions of the OS. But you shouldn't ever rely on it, right? Because it's not important to you. You just want to access the data.
That's insane. Yeah. That blew my mind. Wow. Okay.
Reserve capacity.
Got more than I bargained for.
It's a fun little tip that you can go ahead and use. So finally, it's time for mini review corner. And I received a device that I did have last time. I just forgot about it. But that is the Apple Watch Series 8. So I figured I would talk about it. I am coming from an Apple Watch Series 5/3. So my 5 was my main driver, and my 3 was my nighttime watch for sleep tracking. I want to give some background there. So my 3 is the big boy watch, the larger size, whatever millimeter size that was. They constantly change, so I'm just gonna call them the big ones and the small ones. The Ultra is on its own spectrum, so we'll leave it there. I have not seen one in person, by the way, so I have no idea how massive it will look on me. But still tempted because it's orange. Anyways, I had the Series 3, so very old watch, but large. And then I have a Series 5, which was the watch 2 years afterwards. I added the rounded corners and smaller, and it had like all the new health sensors, basically. And this is my first new watch since. So immediate first impressions, the first thing I noticed was the little pad to type your like code to like unlock the watch is absolutely massive compared to both of my previous watches. So this one, like the Series 7, has the edge-to-edge display. And I immediately realized that even though the watch is much smaller than it's the same size as my Series 5, it had a much bigger number pad than the Series 3, which was a much larger watch. That one had the square cutout. So, that was the first thing I noticed where there was like a major difference between the Series 8 and what I was previously used to. And then from there, the second thing I immediately noticed is how much better the battery life is. Oh my goodness. So when I first got my Series 5, that was a brand new watch. It could not last as long as the Series 3 that it was supposedly replacing, that was 2 years old at the time. Because it was much smaller and it had the first always on display and it was much faster. So like all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of new things about the watch that the battery was like getting better, right? Like the battery's the same technology, but the processor was like sipping less and less to support all these new features, but it could not last as long as the Series 3, especially if you did workouts or anything like that. I was doing long walks at the time and I was like, forget about it. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, like both my watch, I'm like rotating ever since I updated to watchOS 9, I think. It's so hard to keep track of these numbers. They should have just like kept them in lockstep and it would have been easy. But anyways, we're in watchOS 9 for Apple Watch Series 8. And I installed it on my Apple Watch Series 5, but not my 3 because it wasn't supported. And ever since I did that, like generally the battery power was like, I was switching within the day between watches, not even like getting to nighttime. My watch was like dying. I was losing half my steps, and I was like, no, my steps. No, it wasn't my steps. It was my stand hours. I was like, no, my stand hour record is tarnished. Turns out they don't keep track of like stand hour streaks, which is good. But I have since learned of lots of what I like to call speedrunner strats of faking data, getting something that satisfies me, the user. So yeah, I was disgruntled by that and very, very surprised when the Series 8 came, because the battery was something that was like eye-opening that a small watch could do this. I was expecting like, hey, it'll probably be better a little bit. Yeah. But it seems like Apple had a good 3 years of using the same exact like processor basically to just improve the power efficiency of that processor rather than the speed. So yes, it's a tiny bit faster than my Series 5, but most importantly, like it is way better in terms of battery efficiency. And this thing happily went through the day, through the night, and then through most of the rest of the day. And like very much surprised me in that regard. So
nice.
If you were like stuck on the larger watch sizes because you wanted that extra battery, or you needed that extra screen, you really don't need to think about that anymore, especially if you didn't know that the Series 6 and Series 7 were like improving this in these key areas. So yeah, those are my overall impressions of the Series 8. It's like if I had a Series 7, I would not even consider this. And probably not even a Series 6. But at this point, I have a 3-year-old watch and a 5-year-old watch. The 5-year-old watch no longer gets system updates. So it was a good point in time to consider switching. And, the faster charging. I forgot about the faster charging. This thing charges so fast. Like, literally, I have it plugged into one of those USB chargers, which makes me sad because at my bedside, I have one of those Anker, like, 10-plug USB things. But I can't use that because USB-C is not a thing on there. So I'm kind of out of luck in terms of faster charging from that thing. But plugged into the wall, it goes so fast that like when this thing is at 10%, I'm like, okay, I'll take it off. I put it there, and I like put my other watch on, and 30 to 45 minutes later, this one is almost completely charged again. And
Nice.
that was like something totally unexpected. So. Yeah, there's one like headlining feature for this watch that any of the other watches did not have, and that was like the temperature sensing. I opened it on day one. It says, "Hey, you need 5 nights of temperature sensing for this to work." And I tried it again this morning. Actually, let me try it right now. And I believe it's in the health app, and I believe it just kind of like says, "Oh, here, wrist temperature." I am, as of today, 0.57 degrees Fahrenheit above baseline. So it just kind of gives you a little graph and shows you where baseline is, and tells you if you're like doing better or worse. So I guess I will wait until the point of time that I get like drastically sick, and then it's just gonna like climb and plateau at some high temperature for a while and be like, you were sick at this point in time, and I'll be able to go back 2 years of my life and be like, oh, look, that time I was sick, because it shows up on the graph. Otherwise I have like no like real use for the temperature thing, but some people do, and I think it's cool that it gets added for that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Apple Watch Series 8. If you have an ancient watch, consider it, because it is amazing in that regard. I'm usually not one to like wait in between generations of watches, or devices in general. I have been for the watches. So every time like I get a new watch, I am able to enjoy that satisfaction that things are like drastically better. Whereas most of the time Apple's like incrementally improving this. It's 15% faster here. It's 15% faster here. And over 3 years of 15% faster is like, that's a big improvement, right? So it's nice to be able to feel that.
Cool. Can I hijack the mini review corner? Okay, cool. We both know someone that works at Apple and was able to get me a discount on this. So Dimitri's whole thing of unlocking his watch because the number pad is bigger, that was like
enough.
The catalyst, and I was like, fine, okay, whatever. So, and then that person at Apple was like, hey, I've got a discount code that's running out if you want it. I was like, okay. So I got one too when I was, and I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, definitely not planning on it. And I think it like I got the bigger one. And I think out of the door with tax and everything, it was like just under $400. So it was like a pretty good saving. I think it was 15%. And I drove it. I was at a mall like 30 minutes from my house. Picked it up that same day and everything. And I'm not one to wear my watch very often anyway, but I've been trying to wear a little bit more. And so I had the Series 4 before this, and that was the one always on display.
I think it had the rounded corners, right? That was the rounded corner generation.
Yes. And as I was driving home, and in the couple times that I've had to like drive up to work since, the always on screen has annoyed me so much when I'm driving. I turned it off. I don't like it.
We get extra battery now.
I would probably, yeah, I know. And that was like, okay, I tried it out for a few days and I can't get used to it because like I still see it, and sometimes it thinks that I want to look at it and it wakes up and changes, and it's annoying to me. So I'm not sure I'm going to keep it. I know that my Series 4 was able to get watchOS 9, and I know that that's, it's basically end of life at this point. It's probably not going to get watchOS 10. But I don't know if I'm going to keep it, it's good. Okay, also another thing, half of the reason that I wanted it, because I thought that the midnight color was blue, it's just black. Oh, no. So I bamboozled myself with Apple's naming schemes. I thought it was going to be a blue watch. The band is really cool. I got that sport loop that's like, well, let me grab it. This one. Which I really like the band, and I honestly might just buy the band and return the watch. It's cool, and the screen is significantly bigger, but I just don't know if I use my watch enough to even justify it with the discount and everything. So I'm it's not like I'm a skeptic of the improvements and changes and stuff, and I think like crash detection is another cool thing that it has, but I'm gonna have that on my new phone. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to bum out the mini review corner or anything. It's just I don't know if I'm like not the target audience for an Apple Watch really. I use it for notifications and that's about it. And I know that that should be motivating to me to like use it to work out and stuff. I don't. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the bare minimum thing, like getting me to move. So that's like the reason why I'm invested in it. Like I have a running 1,000-day streak of like the move thing, and I always try to get the monthly challenge. And sometimes the monthly challenge is like, you need 2,000 extra minutes. I'm like, 2,000 extra minutes? Or like some insane thing that it decides for me. And I'm like, okay, I'll do my best. Sometimes speedrunning strats get involved in that process.
There you go.
So like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I need a stand. I'm standing. Getting that stand. So
that's awesome.
That works less reliably on the
notifications.
newer watches than the older ones, by the way. That used to be really easy to trick. Now it's getting a little smarter about like, oh, that does not look like you're standing very much. But like sometimes you get mad because like you did the stand and it's like it didn't get the stand and then it like moved on and I'm like I standed.
I am standing. I'll get notifications that like it's like you're almost there. You only need to stand for a few more minutes when I'm like sitting down eating lunch. And I'm like,
Oh, I wish the stand notifications happened at the beginning of the hour rather than the end. Because I'm like, 10 minutes. I just have one last thing to finish. And it's like 5:02 p.m. I'm like, no. It's like, just not enough time.
yeah.
Oh, I was reminded of something else that did get added. So this is something that you need to like turn on in accessibility. But if you triple click your thing, you get the accessibility sheet, right? And one of them is Apple Watch mirroring. And this will just go ahead and you can see Spencer while that loads. And
that's cool.
Yeah, of course it's not working when I do a live demo of it. But I didn't make this product, so I don't feel like sad by that. Oh, connecting. Connected.
You're like airplaying to your phone. That's cool.
Yeah, so you get the watch. And you can go ahead and like spin. Oh, this gonna be awkward from this direction.
Dude.
But you can like spin the crown. You can tap on it to go to the home screen. You can basically use the watch. So the use case for this for me is you're grocery shopping. You have your phone in your hand already, but there's something on your watch that's not on your phone that's like easily accessible. Like perhaps the workout or whatnot. I don't know what kind of example I'm giving. It's like grocery shopping. You got to do your workout. It's the one time a day that I walk. Got to get my walk.
The best workout.
the indoor shopping route walk. But like if you're out on a walk and you need to like pause or do something on your watch, and your only free hand is the one that's holding your phone, you can just triple click that.
That's cool.
That little home button, power button, whatever they call them on phones anymore. And you can get access to that, and I thought that was like really neat. So I guess you get double
good use of
code
accessibility
completion tips
for everyone
this year.
Yeah.
This week, not this year. So yeah, the Apple Watch Series 8. Thumbs up from me, thumbs down from Spencer.
No, it's not a thumbs down. It's just I don't. It's like I already have a watch and I would use it for the same stuff. The new screen doesn't just. I don't know.
It's a bigger screen.
Neutral.
Brighter.
It is a bigger screen, and yes, it is brighter. That's for sure.
For the dark room.
I love the yeah. I love the the flashlight thing, and it's just like white pop over, and that's all it is. It's so good.
It's using technology for what it's meant for. Putting
that's
a
right.
white. Do you remember there used to be like flashlight apps that would do exactly that before there was a flash on the phones? And then Apple was like, "You can't make a flashlight app anymore. We have too many of these. No more."
And it would just like tank your phone's battery because like
it
the
lasts
LEDs were
quite
not...
a long time now. Like with the actual LED in the back, like sometimes I forget it.
Yeah, now
and it's like hours of forgetting. And it's like, oh, this did not kill my battery as much as I thought it would.
And it wouldn't make your phone hot like it did in the past. Mm-hmm. Like I remember with my
it makes that part, the flash, very hot.
It was like not meant hot. To stay on. Yeah, good times. We have progressed a little bit since then.
As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who's at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis on Twitter, and for joining me this week. My name once again is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL, and we'll see y'all next week. Thanks.
Bye.